Good evening, everyone. I'm Councillor Maureen Cleater, the Chairman of Housing and Community Cohesion and Policy Advisory Committee. Please, when we ever rename these, can we make it shorter? And I'm pleased to welcome you to this meeting. The meeting will be broadcast live and recorded for playback on the Council's YouTube channel. Will anyone else be recording the proceedings? As Councillor Mackay isn't here, I will suggest no one is going to reserve their right. I ask so that people at the meeting will know if this will be happening. If the fire alarm sounds during the meeting, please remain seated and members of the Democratic Services team will assess the situation and give further instructions on the evacuation of the building if necessary. Item 1 on your agenda, are there any apologies? No. So that's item 2 irrelevant then, no substitutes. There are no urgent items. Are there any visiting members? I see Councillor Cooch. Would you like to come up? Yeah.
She's doing the item.
Oh, you're doing the item, that's fine. I have been corrected properly by Cassie. Item 5, any disclosures from members or officers? No. Item 6, are there any disclosures of lobbying? No. Item 7, to consider whether any item should be taken in private because of possible disclosure of exempt information. I move that all items be taken in public. However, if members wish to discuss the information contained within item 16 exempt appendix to item 14, Corbyn's phase 2 update, or item 17 exempt appendix to item 15 temporary accommodation plan, it will be necessary to move into closed session due to the likely disclosure of exempt information for the reasons specified, having applied the public interest test. Is that agreed? Thank you. Item 8 is the minutes of the meeting held on the 9th of December 2025. Forgot what year it was then. That's not good, is it? Start to the meeting. Are there any comments on the accuracy of the meeting? They're on page 1 to 3 in your agenda pack. Okay, I move that the minutes of the meeting held on the 9th of December, including the exempt minutes, be approved as a correct record and signed. Is that agreed? Agreed. Thank you very much. Item 9 is the forward plan relating to the committee's terms of reference, pages 4 to 9. Are there any comments on the forward plan, or do the Cabinet members wish to make any comments? No. I move that the forward plan be noted. Is that agreed? Item 10 is a member agenda item request tackling period poverty, which is pages 10 to 14 on your agenda pack. It is to be introduced by Councillor Cooch. Councillor Cooch.
Thank you very much to the Chair for letting me bring this member agenda item request, and thank you to the committee for your time to read the papers. It's been a while since I've presented to a committee like this, which is interesting. It was quite a lot of information to fit into one paper. I know you have enough to read already. So one of the things that I need to, I guess, disclose at the start, but we've discussed whether it's a declaration or not, is this is something that matters a lot to me. It's why I wanted to bring the paper, but I am also an ambassador for Hey Girls UK, who are a charity, maybe a CIC, who work in the period poverty space, hence why I know a little bit about this subject, but wanted to mention that. I also wanted to say that wanted your patience on bringing this as a member agenda item request. It's an interesting way to do it. I haven't done it before, but we discussed bringing this to full council, but that's not the most expedient way to get things done. And I know I have support from the council administration. I've discussed this with Stuart and other members of the cabinet, but I wanted this to be brought to a forum that's open and deliberative, especially considering the kind of community nature of it, to ensure that we could get councillor feedback and buy-in into the process rather than just getting on with it without any kind of consultation. It's also worth caveating to say that I delivered a project like this when I was in an officer role at Swell Borough Council. But that's partly why I wanted to bring it. Getting involved in Hey Girls UK again, I found out that there still aren't any other similar schemes in Kent. I set that one up in 2021. It's now 2026, so it's just quite sad to see that no other councils have taken a role in this area. There are hygiene banks and other kind of forms of public donations via food banks, etc. But I feel that the council has a responsibility to provide resources, but also that kind of education piece in this area. Uh, there's a lot of information in the pack, and I'm aware it's a very kind of all-encompassing subject. So the main bit being period poverty and access to products, but also the environmental impacts of when you introduce reusable products as a solution. Not only are you setting women and girls up for many years if they're in a state of period poverty, and if you can provide them a reusable product that lasts them 5 to potentially 10 years in the case of things like moon cups, you're kind of really providing a long-term solution for them, but you're also providing an environmental solution. You're reducing the waste and the carbon production, and also lack of kind of chemicals and microplastics in the body, which is a whole different subject that I haven't included. So by providing free access to menstrual products for staff and the community, the council would be able to address deprivation, champion sustainability, and model dignity and care. A couple of the stats in the report that I'd like to highlight are 1 in 10 girls being unable to afford period products, 27% of girls in the UK then using a period product for longer than recommended because they can't afford a fresh one. As mentioned, the kind of cheaper value of reusable products over a lifetime being 88 to 98% less financially. And then one of the stats I did get from the waste team is that there's an estimated 618 tonnes of sanitary products collected each year in Maidstone. And then the final one that I'll just add is that almost 1 in 5 people with periods say that they miss work, with most or every period costing 3.25 billion to the economy every year, which is quite a staggering statistic. As a result, I'd really love the committee to recommend to Cabinet, that's kind of the process of this agenda item request, the principles at 1.16 in the report. Those principles can be applied, and again, this is with the caveat that this paper doesn't go as much into delivery because the recommendation is for officers to take it away, look at how it could and would be delivered and take that report to Cabinet. But the key principles from my perspective would be staff provision. So there is provision in Maidstone House, but I've spoken to officers and there isn't necessarily a coherent policy across all NBC-owned sites. Education and awareness, so developing a campaign for staff and the public about the benefits of reusable products and the environmental impact, but also community distribution, so finding an allocated dedicated budget, for example, 10,000 across 2 years to provide free reusable or low plastic products to those in need, for example, distributed via community hubs like libraries, leisure centres, food banks, etc. And one of the main things I'd like to ask the committee to discuss is were you to support this paper, is where you think provision in the community could sit, particularly within your wards, any factors that might be missed out in this report. And then the last thing is that the paper notes that the recommendations to Cabinet would need to be kind of joined up work across climate, health, community and other relevant departments, and also that it'd be really important to include the relevant monitoring and evaluation in any projects that are taken forward. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Councillor Cooch. It's now open for discussion. I've got Councillor Burke has indicated he would like to speak.
Thank you. So I'm 100% behind it. I'm not going to have anything to say about it. You know, some of the language used in here is debatable, but that's for another day. If anything, I just don't think it goes far enough. I'm an advocate that it should be free universally in the country, regardless of county councils, local councils. 100% behind it. Not going to have anything for me. The only thing I would personally like to see is once that report is done, that it does come back, so that we can all have a proper look at it, take it away, digest it prior to the meeting when it comes in, so that I can seek some further points from some of the residents potentially, or even some family members, to be honest, because I'm not going to pretend I know anything about it, to be fair. But I know, previous working in the civil service, Most civil service buildings provide it. It's never questioned. So no, I'm 100% behind it. I would just personally like to see the report come back here so we can put our points to it if it's worth anything, just to make sure when it does go to Cabinet we get it right. That's my only thing, and I'll be interested in other people's views in terms of whether we should have it back, because I'd like to digest it first.
Thank you very much. Councillor Harper.
Yeah, I'd support this idea. Point of correction in paragraph 1.2, that these products are distributed across Northern Ireland as well. So in Northern Ireland, which where everyone knows I go a lot, it's available in all the public libraries as a good distribution point. And I think you were asking about distribution points. So I was thinking obviously about libraries, if we can get that as well, because we've only got a few buildings ourselves. But and as you ask us to think about our own wards, so thinking about Fans and Oakwood, I wondered about possibly looking at GP surgeries, because we've got a number of GP surgeries. We don't really have any public buildings, for instance, in our ward, or really the Bridge area doesn't either. And perhaps talking with our secondary schools, especially the ones with obviously sixth forms and places like Mid Kent College, because those may be good distribution points where you are likely to hit people, or that's not the right word, is it? People in poverty will be in further in education up until 18 now, and so therefore if we can work with the schools, I would have thought that's a good place to get in. But as Councillor Burke said, you know, hopefully this will go to Cabinet and then they'll come back with a full policy.
Thank you very much, Councillor Harper, Councillor Burke. So, as one of the two women on this committee, this is something that's been campaigned about via trade unions, via employers for many, many years, especially when they used to be considered luxury items and we got charged 20% VAT on them, which was always a big bugbear. I think you're right. I think the report can come back to committee. I've just checked on that one. And obviously I think the more input we get, I think it's really important, bearing in mind the number of, shall we say, blockages we get in sewers, etc., that we look at a more sustainable way. And I don't think people should underestimate the impact. I know I was someone who used to suffer quite badly from a very early age. Even to the place where ambulances were called because I'd passed out and people thought I was seriously ill. I wasn't. It was just, unfortunately, the time of the month for me. I think the other thing is it's not just secondary schools, because children are starting their periods younger now, so the later stages of primary schools as well is a good place to look, because it's not only the children, it's the parents of the children. And that more local connection is likely to be in primary schools as well, where mums drop their kids off. So I think we're all in agreement. You know, as Councillor Baker said, you may think some of the wording is, but the principle is is what we're all agreed on. Councillor Jeffrey.
Yeah, I just wanted to come back in terms of the one member of the Cabinet's view on it. And firstly, the member item request process is open to members, and it's really good to use it. I think it's only the second or third time it's been used. Well done, and others might want to use that. You might want to, in terms of Councillor Burke's comments about this it should be national, maybe the committee might want to propose an additional recommendation for the officers to consider in the report, for then Cabinet to consider a lobbying letter to national government calling for this to be rolled out across the country. That would be a reasonable option. And in terms of the paper itself, it's a small amount of money, huge impact. So yes, I certainly don't have a problem with it.
Thank you. I'm happy to propose that as an amendment, as long as someone's willing to second it. Councillor Burke. Yeah. So bring the report back to Cabinet, and a letter, once it's all approved, etc., a letter to government, read the rollout of whatever policy procedure that we come up with.
Sorry, you're saying come back to go to cabinet or come to policy advisory committee?
We wanted the report, once it's all agreed through cabinet, to come back so that we can discuss it as well again.
Okay, to come
yeah,
back.
yeah. And ask the cabinet, once everything's been agreed, to write a letter to government so we can roll out this. As you say, this isn't a party political thing. This is something that women and girls have to put up with. Some sail through it, the majority don't, unfortunately. And I'd like to thank Councillor Cooch for coming. Sorry, Councillor Povey, you're waving your pen at me. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm 100% behind this. Don't get me wrong. I mean, anybody suffering with, either intense pain or, lack of sanitary products in an office environment, it's not a nice situation. So, whilst I fully support it, I would just like to point out that the pain aspect, while I finally get, for me, the individual should decide whether they're capable to work or not. And there's a lot of people with kidney stones and all that type of thing that comes in the same sort of bracket. And I should also point out there's a lot of men that have gone through prostate surgery that have a similar need for sanitary products. I can tell you a personal story about that. Thank you.
I think the point the motion is making, or the report is making, is you don't go through it every month for about 30 years. And that's the problem that most women face, but totally take on board. And if you want to bring something to the council regarding the availability of products to support men with prostate and other issues, I have a son who's got kidney stones, gallstones and Crohn's, so I'm well aware of the issues surrounding that. You have a right to reply, Councillor Cooch, if we finish totally with any contributions from other members. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'll try and keep it brief, but I know I can talk for England. Councillor Burke's point about the national rollout, yes, that's exactly the point. I think it's Northern Ireland, Scotland and Wales that all distribute free products. England's the last one, so if we can write a letter, that would be fantastic. Councillor Harper's point about GP surgeries in the wards that don't have NBC-owned buildings, that's fantastic, because that would cover my ward. KCC did have a project at one point distributing projects in libraries, but I don't know where that's at, so that might be something that we need to look into. Secondary schools, colleges, primary schools, again, yes, I used to deliver training sessions in secondary schools on these items. One of the things I didn't mention was reusable products, for example, period pants, opening up sport to young girls who start to freak out and drop out of netball and swimming and all these things because they don't think they can do both, which is really sad. So any type of education that we can add in here and delivery in schools would be brilliant, but I know I'm kind of asking the world at this point. Links to sewer blockages is very pertinent at the moment. And on Councillor Povey's point about like the pain aspect across all genders, I can't remember if I put the exact wording in there, but one of the things that could be reviewed as part of NBC's delivery is, I guess, like, what's the word? Sickness policies and people asking for time off or flexi time, and whether that includes periods, because for some people it can be quite hard to ask for a day off for something, especially if they, maybe they don't feel like their manager is open to having that conversation. So that's a really important part of this, but I don't know where in the kind of policy cycle that kind of absence and sickness policy is, but it could be worth conversations around other issues that people have where they want to know that NBC is a place that they're open to raising, quite personal issues in order to be able to work to the best of their ability. So thank you for raising that, and thank you for your time and for hopefully approving the paper. Thank you.
So with the suggestions that we've said, is that agreed? All those in favour agreed? Yeah? Yeah. Thank you very much, Councillor Cooch. Feel free to stay if you have nothing more exciting to do. And I'm sure Marden Parish Council at this time is very important for you to attend, so thank you very much. Right, item 11 is the Corporate Strategy Year 2 Action Plan and Key Performance Indicators. Before the report is introduced, we have a public speaker, Ben Darlington, and he will have 3 minutes to address the committee. Once you've addressed the committee, Mr. Darlington. If you've got any sort of questions or you want any response, you're more than welcome to stay for any responses.
Got it. Thank you. Okay, so I'm here to talk about nature connectedness. I was here with two committees last week, and I'll try not to repeat myself too much, but I do have one very specific request for this committee. So just to clarify, nature connectedness, I mean the way how much somebody is aware of and appreciates nature around them. So there's a bucket of research looking at that correlation between that and the general health of somebody, and that's now established. What's interesting is there's also a research emerging indicating that nature connectedness also has an impact on community cohesion and general pro-social, pro-environment behaviours, emergent but starting to strengthen. There is nothing at the moment in the NBC two-year action plan or KPIs looking at nature connectedness. We've got a lot of actions looking at nature, but nothing looking at nature and people together. It's just absent. That's not to say there isn't a bucket of stuff going on, activity generally, to do with maybe a moat park, helping people appreciate nature. But that's very different from a strategic priority where you say nature connectedness matters to us. So the specific ask of this committee, over the last few decades, we've basically stripped nature out of our daily lives. But we've also got to a place where people are living in accommodation where either they have no access to a space to grow something, or if they do, they don't use that space. So 42% of gardens in this country are currently paved over, for example. People are just not using or accessing those opportunities. And I think there's a relationship between that basic disconnect, and community cohesion, starting to be established, but early days. So I'd like us to start to reverse the trend. And my request of this committee is to consider recommending to Cabinet that there is some measurement, KPI assessment of the proportion of people living in the borough that have access to at least 1 square metre of private space to grow something, might just be a balcony, and the proportion of people that are using that space to grow something. The data around this is difficult, but I've had a quick chat with Anna before sitting down, and I'm going to get in touch and see if there's something to do. And I also recognise that at a time of extreme pressure on housing, it can sound a bit daft to be talking about window boxes or balconies. If you look at the research, it's not daft at all, and there's never going to be a good time. It won't be perfect. There is a good time to make anything perfect, but starting the journey matters, because the minute you start to measure something, you start to think about how you could make it better. So in closing, I guess Maidstone's got 12, 15 months left to really make a difference. And I'm asking that we use some of those 12 months to make a bit difference around nature connectedness, to say it really matters as a corporate priority, and to also say it starts at home. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bang on time. With 2 seconds to spare. So well done. Thank you very much. As this is going to be introduced by Councillor Jeffrey, do you want to come in now?
Shall I just introduce it and I'll pick up any points that Ben has made. So the papers you've got are based around the corporate strategy that we agreed in February 2025. This is the Year 2 action plan, Year 3 of the administration, Year 2 of the action plan to support the corporate strategy. And apologies, I think Stan and Paul have heard this 3 times now each. Apologies. So I know I've got to make sure I don't forget anything. The KPIs that Ben, I've forgotten your surname, Mr. Darlington. Thank you. I've only known him for a decade. Has pointed out, they relate directly to the corporate strategy rather than to the action plan. So they are the things that we're measuring the progress against the strategy rather than the progress of the action plan. We've in other packs we've had discussions about how we might improve the reporting on the action plan around specific KPIs aligned to the various points. As you know, we brought back a 6-month update on progress, and we could put some KPIs around some of the items, certainly. So the action plan itself contains 30 items, the same as last year. It starts with things like LGR, as you'd expect. It's got the town centre work in there, it's got river restoration, it's got an awful lot around community cohesion and safety, and it's got work on the rural economy. So there's a lot on there that we've then translated into the budget, into the second paper, which you'll see the read across between the year 2 action plan and the budget for next year to make sure we're funding the stuff properly. I'm probably not going to say any more. Anna, what have I forgotten? Nothing? Okay, well, Anna's going to answer all the detailed questions because I can't remember the answers to anything else.
So, Councillor Harper, as this is how many times you've heard this now, I hope you've got a new and original question to ask Councillor Jeffrey.
I'll only say, as I've said at the other meetings, I think, I welcome the plan. It gives us an idea of what we're trying to achieve in the last year. I've had discussions with Stuart outside the other 2 packs, so I know that we're looking at making sure that we keep in track to deliver this stuff, because the next year is basically the last year we can do these sorts of items in. I was going to just raise the point around nature connections, because speaking with Mr. Darlington at the other committees, I think what's the important point which came out to me is what we're looking at in terms of access to nature is access to nature where you are, where you live, not going to parks or nature reserves, because I know you didn't mention tonight, but the evidence is starting to show that if you actually have to travel to see nature, that does no good for your own well-being. The well-being benefits of nature are when it's where you are. And we discussed last week at the pack I chair, the planning and healthier communities, the fact that the streetscape around the borough, not just in urban areas but in rural areas as well, is becoming harder. We're losing street trees and the paving over front gardens. So I think there's items where we could also take this up when we look at the local plan. And I think that may be in terms of some of the longer term things, thinking about streetscape and perhaps planning policies in terms of 1 square metre in housing, in new developments and so on. But I know Stuart has committed last week that we will try to do work on this through things such as the rights of nature and the healthier borough through health in all policies. That was discussed last week. So I'd like to, thank Mr. Darlington for spending the time coming to talk to us about what I think is a really important issue, and one perhaps we tend to forget in terms of when we're looking at our action plans. But I'm happy to move the report with the actions and the KPIs tonight to help move it on.
Are there any other contributions? Mr. Councillor Povey?
Yeah, I thank Mr. Darlington for his input. It's kind of interesting, really, because I think, a lot of people think that a reform councillor is a climate change denier and hasn't much interest in nature and that kind of thing, and nothing could be further from the truth, really. I always seek the opportunity to go out in the open world and adore the lakes and the mountains and the coast, and I take pictures of bugs, and I'm on a Facebook group and ask what this bug is and that kind of thing. So I think there's a real interest there. But I think you're on 2 levels. Firstly, I've got plenty of space. I've got 8 acres. I'm quite lucky. But my lifestyle doesn't really allow me to grow very much because I haven't got the time. I'd love to grow some asparagus and learn about things. So I've been thinking for a long time it would be a good idea to get someone in the village who's got that interest but hasn't got the space and team up with him and work with him. So I think, it's a very good initiative. And the other key thing that I think for it is, I think there is a real link with mental health and the natural world. I speak to a lot of people who are not in a good place mentally, and something I often say to them is, you need to give yourself a sense of achievement. You know, a way of getting out of a bad place mentally. If you feel worthless and you're not of any value to the world, is to give yourself something you can achieve, be it learn an instrument, learn to paint, learn a language. And the key thing is grow something and give it to someone. And I think there's a very important point there. So thank you very much.
Councillor Burke.
Yeah, I just want to also put my thanks across. It's great to have someone come and talk to us. To be fair, it's what it's all about. But just from my point of view, like what Sir said, you know, we've got 18 months. If you're going to do something strategic, you've got to look 2, 5, 10 years. That's my only reservation. Start something new. I'd rather just do really, really well at the stuff we're already focusing on. Personally, if we weren't potentially being dissolved, you know, while nature is nowhere near the top of my priority list, I would be open to consideration. But with 18 months, I'd rather just focus on the things we're already doing and try and get them gold standard before we try and bring other things in for such a short window. But I acknowledge the point, but I just think unfortunately it's poor timing from what's going on.
Councillor Big, before I just bring you in to respond on that, Councillor Jeffrey, being brought up in an area that was pure concrete, not one bit of garden, communal or otherwise, where I was brought up, I absolutely agree. We had railings with, you know, flowers, herbs, you name anyone trying to get a bit of greenery. Because now where I was brought up, it's all green. Because there was EU money when all the flats were pulled down. I think also I agree with Councillor Povey regarding the therapeutic benefits of nature and gardening and farming. I used to work at the Trevor Gibbons unit. We had a little mini farm there with not only growing things but with animals as well. And I think that really, if nothing else, if we start something, we're getting Trailblazer money, for example, for Shetway Parkwood Mangravet. That might be a good way to actually look at putting something in those areas, linking it into the fight against poverty, making it better. It's money we're getting off the government, so that might be something we can do as not a quick fix, but bringing something in that's benefit to communities who are struggling in some areas with poverty, etc. So over to you, Councillor Jeffrey.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to come back on a couple of those points. Paul mentioned the local plan. Obviously, we've been doing work around the SPD. And one of the difficulties I've had in terms of translating what Mr. Darlington said is kind of it's already in my brain, it's in other people's brains. So, but he's right. It needs to kind of come out and be a bit more overt in the work we do. So if you look at the SPD work we've done, we've absolutely tried to build in as best we can nature corridors, nature connectedness, and so forth with the people living there. I was out in Shepway this afternoon, walking around the redevelopment. They're putting allotments in. There's some the gardens there will look because they're big, nice. We've obviously got some groundbreaking charities in Maidstone. We've got Dandelion Time that does ecotherapy with kids, and Blackthorn, which does the same with adults. So the other bit that we're probably missing is around understanding the proportion of people who have got access to that metre of growing space, and we've had some conversations about how we might start to measure that, because I think it's an important metric. So I thank Mr. Darlington and the committee for those suggestions. They're all really helpful.
Thank you very much, everyone. So we've had proposed to accept. Is that agreed from Councillor Harper? Agreed? Yeah, thank you. As per the papers, yeah. So item 12 is the medium-term financial strategy and budget proposals. It's to be introduced by Councillor Summersgill, and I'm hoping that the internet is working better than the water is at the moment around Maidstone. Nick, you ready to go? We've still got water. Thank you, Councillor Somersgill. Mr Lovegrove?
Only one small item to mention, which is a slight error in the report. So on page 42 and 43, we have some extra text relating to some of the capital programmes, relates to a different pack. I know Councillor Harper will know, because that's the text missing from the other committee. So we can just ignore that. The numbers in the actual appendix are all correct. So it's just a note on accuracy, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Oliver?
Thank you, Chair. I've just got one sort of slight question, just clarity. There's a bit on page 61 around the overall 5-year capital programme, which is 5.11. That paragraph amounts to 232 million, including 144 million for the housing programme. And so that's additional borrowing above the 80 million that's already in place. And that's going to happen in 26-27, and that's regardless of LGR and everything else. And also, like, will you still get the good rate is the question, because obviously if that's up by, I don't know, half a percentage point, that's a massive hole in the finances. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, happy to try and answer that one. So the plan is still to go ahead with housing. The Cabinet's ambition is to open the housing revenue account, make sure that we have housing with the Maidstone badge on it, to hopefully give that a longevity of going forward. In terms of the affordability, the actual housing revenue account, we have to do a 30 to 40 year business case. So when that comes forward, we have to prove that's affordable. You tend to do it over that longer period. It's just the same as your own mortgage. It's how long it takes to pay that mortgage back. So we'll be making careful consideration of how much you borrow, how much the rate is, and so forth. In terms of rent levels, they're all set virtually by government, so there's sort of limited flexibility in what we can do about that. So overall, we're hoping that should be able to go forward and be long-term affordable.
Councillor Harper?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I thought it was a bit funny when Adrian pointed out those items which went to are on this pack, which because I ended up reading them out last week because I hadn't been there, so that's quite funny. No, I mean, I think a lot of what we see here in terms of what Stuart said links up with the action plan for next year in terms of some of the growth items. I suppose in terms of this one, there's a couple of specifics to do, which are just one of which is I suppose they're questions actually. So the first one on page 38 is where we've got housing, temporary accommodation, £174,000 saving. Now, I've probably been on this council too long. I've been there through 11 budgets here, and every year we underestimate the impact of temporary accommodation needs, and every year it's the major overspend this authority has of anything £1 million or whatever. And we have to therefore do we've always luckily had compensating underspends elsewhere or things we can delay a year to accommodate it. And I know last year when we went through the budget process, I can't remember what the precise line was, but it was a temporary accommodation. Either we didn't put in any money or any extra money for it. And of course this year, what we're looking at, the biggest overspend pressure on the authority is temporary accommodation. Now I know and I fully support the work we've done to purchase the properties. We've done a number in my own ward and 1,000 affordable homes, which, I mean, Maureen and I and Stuart, we were the only councillors here when that started, and Dinesh. We've all supported the 1,000 affordable home policy through all its iterations and so on. But despite all of that good work, and it is good work, the number of people being made homeless, especially in the private sector, is constantly growing. And I was only talking actually to a council officer yesterday who is a renter and had notice served on her by her landlord. Luckily, she was in a situation she's purchased a property, but this is going on all the time. We just have to look around wards, such as Fountain Oakwood, at a number of houses which have been on the market and are doing work on the electoral roll at the moment. And you're looking at something like 15% turnover. that primarily is coming from the private rented accommodation. So whilst I know we're doing a lot of good work around this, I am sceptical of building in a saving from a budget we know every year we've overspent on. So if you even leaving the budget as it is, I think could be a bit of a risky thing, but I really am not convinced that we should anticipate a saving here, because I just do not think there's any evidence that it will be delivered. Suppose that's one question. I fully support the Housing Investment Fund, and I would throw in more, put in more money prudently from our reserves into it if we could do, because I can remember when this scheme started off, I think I worked out we needed something like £50 million in the Housing Investment Fund, or the Housing Revenue Account. If it's £50,000 and 1,000 units, it's big money. But it would be good to get this money added to it, at least so that we're at the point when the Housing Revenue Account has to be bought in, we've got enough money to ensure it's social housing. My other point is on page 42, which is the last item for us, which is the Gypsy, Romany and Traveller site, £4.5 million. Now, I don't have an issue with having, a new Traveller site built to high quality as a sort of exemplar. But my concern is that we know, assuming local government reorganisation goes on, and I know Councillor Summersgill is slightly sceptical, but I think that the likelihood is it will happen. It will mean that we will lose control over our capital budget in terms of new schemes around about March 2027, so just over a year. And it says here, specific costings will be developed when a suitable location has been identified. We're just through the public consultation on the Gypsy and Traveller SPD, and no site has been identified as part of that for a site to take this proposal forward. So I suppose my question on this is, how likely do we think that by March 2027 we will have gone through a procurement exercise, we will have bought the land, and we will have started the work when we actually haven't identified the site yet? Because we haven't done it by then, we will lose the authority, we will lose the ability to do it unilaterally. It would have to be agreed by the shadow unitary authority to use £4.5 million of effectively their money, and I do wonder whether that's likely to happen. So yeah, those really my 2 points on this. Thank you.
Okay. We've got William Cornell online. He can answer. Or are you going to answer temporary accommodation, Simon? Was yours to do with temporary accommodation? Oh, right, okay. So, Councillor Wales, if you want to respond there, that's fine. And then I'll take Councillor Burke.
This is partly answered by the two items time on the temporary accommodation plan, but temporary accommodation has dropped dramatically this year. We're down to just 215 households in temporary accommodation, 208 of which are our own properties. And we're planning to keep enough. There's always going to be some need for much shorter term, overnight temporary accommodation, which is why the empty homes, why the temporary accommodation plan is suggesting that we stick at the 95% level of our total, so we have that flexibility for those people who need emergency accommodation at that point. The fact that that money has been saved this year, and there are no indications of increases that are likely to take place in the short term or even the long term next year. We feel confident to be able to make this a saving in the budget. It will, of course, mean that as we are increasing our own properties, we need to spend more money on that. So it's not that much of a saving, because there's another budget line which is increasing maintenance and repairs and what have you on the properties that we do own. So the fact that numbers are coming down so dramatically is a testament to the hard work by the housing department in Trinity. They've done some really excellent work. The other stabilising effect will come from the renters reform, which will have a deal of security for people not being turfed out of their property at short notice. There'll be a lot more opportunity to plan things and to remove the sort of immediate dispossession of people from the property they've been living in for goodness knows how many years will stabilise that situation as well. So I think things are moving in the right direction on all fronts on this. As to the Gypsy and Traveller and Roma site, Councillor Harwood and I are meeting next week, I think, to go through various options of sites which have come forward. There will then be discussions with members in wards about these sites that have come forward. I haven't seen the list yet, but I'm confident that we will find a site. We must find a site. Otherwise, we're going to be even in more trouble going forwards in the future with the planning process and appeals being lost because we don't have anything in the local plan about the site. I have had correspondence about why we haven't got sufficient provision for Gypsy and Roma travellers in the borough, but at least we now have an authority which is prepared to start the process, which should have been done years ago.
Thank you very much, Councillor Wales. I'm going to let Councillor Burke come in quickly and then Mr Cornell and then back to you, Councillor Harper.
Just a statement for everyone, really. So I don't represent my party when I say this, but anything sort of financial and budgetary, I won't support for the record this evening, because I couldn't in good faith do that when I might challenge it at full council and come up with a potential alternative. So anything budget related, just for the minutes, there won't be my support to recommend this any further, just so everyone's aware.
Thank you very much for making that clear, Councillor Burke. Councillor Harper.
Going back to the Gypsy and Traveller site, we've just gone out to either Section 18 or Section 19 consultation on a SPD. That does not include any space for a significant council-based facility. So I'm not saying you're not having your consultations and discussions with other colleagues, but it is not in a statutory consultation plan. I'm not sure how easy, if at all, from planning legislation, it's going to be to drop in a site which hasn't been through the appropriate statutory consultation process. And I think that's my point. Not that, there's clearly the will to do this. And I chaired the committee when we took the SPD draft. We know there's a big demand here. But I'm just saying I can't see how, given that consultation process, we can suddenly potentially parachute in some stuff at the end which has not been through it and expect it not to be potentially, challenged externally. And as I say, we have only until effectively the end of 2026 to have been through the procurement process and the purchase process to actually enable this to go forward. And I haven't heard anything in the answer which assures me on that. So I'm concerned that there's £4.5 million, which I don't think is going to happen.
Thank you, Councillor Harper. Councillor Jeffrey.
Just on that point around the Section 24 notice, we don't know what will be in the Section 24 notice specifically, but the general feeling, approach for others that we've seen is that schemes that have started, that have got reasonable levels of agreement, that haven't been completed, are allowed to continue. So as long as we have got enough of the way down the line with this purchase, we should be allowed to continue. Obviously, there are risks, because we don't know what they're actually going to write to us about. But I'm hoping we'll have got far enough to say this has to continue.
Right, I don't see any other councillors waiting to speak. I think we've had the answer on temporary accommodation. Thank you, Councillor Wales. So we go to the recommendations on the papers. which are on page 34. With your comments noted, Councillor Burke. Yeah. All those in favour of the recommendations, or do you wish to put a amendment? It's entirely up to you, it's the committee. Right. All those in favour of the recommendations, please show. All those against? That's carried. Thank you. And thank you for making a finance debate really interesting.
Can I just thank Adrian Lovegrove for sitting in and covering for most of my time, and I'll head off to Marden now.
Yeah, enjoy yourself there, Councillor Summerskill. You're near enough to the Balfour Winery, so. Right, item 13 is the empty homes policy, which is on page 129 to 143, with one recommendation on page 129. And Councillor Wales will be introducing this. And obviously we've got John Littlemore, Head of Housing and Regulatory Services here as well, who will contribute as and when as necessary. Councillor Wales, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. So the Council's previous empty homes policy has expired, and this is a refresh. While the number of empty homes in the borough has increased over recent years, this number is consistent with other areas in Kent and the South East. And we're talking about the totality of homes in the area, not just those which the council has control over. There's no statutory duty to deal with empty homes, but we have powers to take proportionate enforcement action. There are approximately 1,700 empty homes in the borough, which is 2.2% of the total stock, and 150 of these have been empty for more than 2 years. And the policy will enable us to prioritise, will continue to prioritise empty homes, acting on the ones that are detrimental to their locality first. And we have undertaken a consultation, and the responses have been broadly agreed with the policy approach. It will enable us to be consistent and transparent as the table of actions, I can't remember whereabouts it is, it's the multicoloured page, shows you the process that will be gone through at each level. So it's not precipitate, it's a fair degree of consultation with landlords of these properties. As I say, these are not ones within the council's control directly, but we are there to encourage landlords to do something about them. There are other measures in there which are charging 200% or 300% of council tax for properties that have been left empty for too long. The aim is to bring these properties back onto the market to make them useful. The largest amount of properties empty at any one time are because of the churn in the market. As people moving from one house and that house hasn't been filled and so on and so on. It's the ones that have been empty and left empty by the landlord or the owner deliberately are the ones that we're trying to target. They've moved abroad or whatever. Some of the ones take a while to sort out, which are probate ones, and the council needs to be aware of those as well, to deal sensitively with those issues. But as I said, they'll take proportionate action targeting those which are sort of causing a nuisance to the amenity because they're being vandalised or they're being overgrown and unsightly in their environment. So I'd recommend the report and the recommendation to you.
Anything you want to add, Mr. Littlemore? No. Okay, does anyone wish to speak on this? Councillor Harper.
Yeah, because this whole idea partly came up from overview and scrutiny, which, like yourself, I sit on. One of the things when we looked at this earlier in the process was looking at social housing and the level of voids there, and some of the reasons why properties are empty. And partly it's due to tenants leaving and waiting to get new in. So also there was quite a lot from memory about the condition of the property was such that it couldn't be let out. So, for instance, the issue of black mould in social housing is obviously a big issue, and if a tenant's moved out of a property with significant black mould, unless the social landlord, Golding Homes or whoever it is, addresses that, they can't re-let the property. So areas like that, I think we should be making sure that we put pressure on these authorities, on public authorities to actually do it. But I would note also that I looked up in Fant at the weekend, all the properties the council's purchased under it's called the P&R scheme. And out of the 19 there were, now it's not necessarily an indicator that they're empty currently, but 11 had nobody on the electoral roll in the property as of the new December roll. So I do wonder, churn comes up, but we do need to make sure that the properties we're purchasing are filled pretty well all the time. Now, I know it's all linked in with temporary homelessness, and as we do the 1,000 affordable homes, hopefully people may move out of those properties and into the other units. But, to have 7,000 odd, what was it? No, 1,700 properties empty in the borough when we are facing a housing crisis I think is criminal. I mean, I know probate takes time and other things, but, there are properties, and we had that report, I think Maureen was there, showing that some houses have remained empty for years. And Councillor Millen and I can think of one house in particular, literally just around the corner from where you live, Kimmy, which has sat there empty for I don't know how many years, and yeah, I think it's. I support this, but I do think we do need to make sure the council is as proactive on every case as it can be to make sure that we don't have people homeless when we know there are properties they could be in.
Yeah, take your point, Councillor Harbour. There's one in John Street that's been empty 30 years. It's like Day of the Triffids now. That particular house is just all overgrown. So I take your point. And obviously, there's not a lot you can do if people are in care, because it's usually KCC that's got the lien on that house for the care costs. And don't even get me started on probate, because I know what's in my casework box and how long it's taken, and that actually causes a lot of stress and anxiety for people who are trying to wrap up someone's estate. But there appears to be a very big waiting list with the HMCTS. Councillor Millen.
I just wanted to add to what Paul Harper said, because we obviously share the same ward. I live next door to an empty property that the council weren't actually aware of the last time this came up to us, and I think we need to be doing more to be advertising to our residents, do you have an empty property where you live that we might not be aware of? Because quite frankly the council weren't aware last time when I looked at the figures for Fountain Oakwood, and they had the one on my road, and they said, oh yeah, they're being really productive. We know that the family that own that property aren't being productive. It has been empty for 15 years. No one has lived in this massive house. The families next door either side have problems with the garden overgrown, the building is dilapidated. There's just so many problems coming from that one that sits empty. But the one across the hall from me, because I live in a flat, it had a hole in the roof, and I had to phone up Mears, because it's owned and operated by Mears, on behalf of Bexley Council, and they didn't care that there was a hole in the roof. The lady in the flat below now has a problem with damp and mould because it's been left empty, and the council had no idea that it had been sat empty for 3 years. And they said, oh, it's not empty. It's like, I live next door to it. I know it's empty. So more needs to be done with the being proactive, getting out to our residents and saying what houses are empty, because I for sure thought that they would know that no one's living there, because there can't be anyone on the electoral roll. They don't have gas because the gasworks were replaced 1.5 years ago and there's no gas pipes that go to it. So it's empty. They've not paid water rates or electricity or council tax. So how does the council not know that it's that empty?
Because they're probably still paying housing benefits on it to someone, to be quite honest. Yeah. Councillor Burke.
Just point 9.4 is a bit worrying around properties for 5 years or more. I'm just a bit mindful, 5 years or more, and they might slip through the net because they're a bit more challenging. I just think we need to be cautious about leaving them because 5 can quickly turn into 10, and then before you know it, it just get left alone, and before you know it just looks like a big hill covered in grass. So I'd just be very mindful around. I know it might take a bit of resource, but I would just keep that on the cards to keep an eye on, because I think it'd be a worrying state of affairs if people sort of think, well, we're on 4.5 years, just leave it a bit longer. No one's going to come knocking. So I think just be mindful of the 5 years or more, because that's when the danger, walls can collapse. Anything can happen if it's not being looked after. So I would try and give it as much attention as we possibly could. If it incurs a cost, it's a cost potentially worth looking at least, because other than that, I think there's no issues from my point of view.
Thank you very much. And I suppose the other worry is if a certain other council thinks they've got someone living there, has anyone been round to check that they're still there? For all we know, someone could be lying there. I mean, it's happened in London. That woman was there 3-4 years? Yeah. Councillor Wales.
Thanks. Clearly, the issues with social landlords and housing associations are outside the scope of the empty homes policy, but we are constantly working with them to improve their void rate and working to make sure that the void rate on our own properties, that they're increasing, to make sure that void rate is acceptable and as low as possible. It's worth noting that we don't have a dedicated empty homes officer. It's done within existing staff resources. But if there are properties that we know about, then please you can make sure that John's team know about them. Had one email today, didn't we, from Councillor Bested, because there's a property that she knew about and didn't know if we did, but we do. But it's just a question of having to work with people. They're private properties. Unless you want us to go down straight into compulsory purchase and what have you, we need to be understanding why these properties are empty and deal with them in a sensitive way.
Thank you, Councillor Povey.
Thank you. Yeah, being relatively new to this committee, I'd like to ask some questions, if that's okay, and maybe some members could come back to me. If I ask, I've got 4 basic questions. The first one is, what kind of precedents are we setting here, or what sort of precedents is there? Is this typical across the country, or are we being revolutionary? The second one is how much notice people will be given. Some of those rises are quite steep. Will they just get a bill, or suddenly their direct debit changes, or will due notice be given? The third one is, will there be any backdating? So if you find out about a property that's been empty for 15 years, it may have been paying council tax at the standard rate for 15 years. What sort of backdated bill are they going to get? And lastly, how do these timescales get reset? So if somebody moves back into a property for a weekend or goes on Airbnb and lets their property out overnight, does that reset it, or is there some sort of criteria that needs to be met for that to happen? Sorry.
No, thank you, Councillor Povey. I'm all for being revolutionary, but that's my politics. Do you want to answer these questions now, Mr. Littlemore, or would you like to send an email response with more detail? It's entirely, I'll leave it between you and Councillor Povey.
I can try and address some of them. Some of them are within the council tax, which is outside my scope of expertise. In terms of precedent, I think we're probably in the middle somewhere. If you look at our figures, we're on average, as Councillor Wells has said, so nothing remarkable there. I think in terms of enforcement intervention, it's been an issue for the whole country to deal with. Empty dwelling management orders were not the panacea that everyone thought they would be. And I think if you look at government reports on the topic, during a 15-year period, there was less than 230 being granted across the whole country. So you can see the size of the problem that we deal with. And I think that part of what you said about timescales and resetting is part of that, because if we're taking enforcement action like a CPO or an EDMO, then somebody can move back in and it does restart the process. So you're right. I mean, there's nothing in law to compel people to tell us when their
home is empty other than in relation to their council tax, there's nothing to compel people to live in their property. So if they want to keep them empty, they're quite able to do so. It becomes an issue, as has been described, when it starts affecting the neighbouring properties, and that's when we really get involved. We do try and work with people, as I say, because the enforcement measures are difficult to actually bring forward. So the issue about notice and backdating, I'll have to defer to my colleagues in council tax, and we'll get an answer to the chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Littlemore. I would say the onus is on the owner to stop or let us know that they're not there and pay council tax. And my last understanding was you only get a rebate back so many years. It used to be 2, and it was tough luck if you hadn't notified them as that. That was my understanding when I used to work in KCC managing properties and that. But as I say, things have changed since I left that. Okay, so do we agree to adopt the empty homes policy? All those in favour? Agreed. Yeah, thank you, that's agreed, as per the papers. Thank you very much, Anne, for answering all those questions. And Councillor Povey, no question is a wrong question, because we've all been there when we first got on the council.
Thank you. I always work on the principle that the stupid question is the one you don't ask.
Right, item 14, Corbyn's Phase 2 update, page 144 to 150, with recommendations on 145. The exempt appendix is 160. If you want questions on that, we'll have to go into closed session, but we'll go on to the documents on white, and that's going to be introduced by Councillor Wales and Philip Morris as well. So over to you.
Thank you very much, Chair. Well, this item relates to an update on the site known as Corbyn's Place Phase 2, following its acquisition in early 2025, so it has been through this pack once before. The site has planning permission in place to deliver 23 homes in total, made up of 19 houses and 4 maisonettes. The report outlines the current position following completion of the tender exercise to identify a suitable contractor for the works element of the project, which has now been concluded. The report also provides an update on the position regarding grant funding, following engagement with Homes England around the funding provision and bidding timescales. The report sets out a number of recommendations and seeks approval to enter into contract for the works while the officers continue to engage with Homes England to explore the possibility of delivering the scheme as an all-social rented development, which will require more grant, subject to the level of funding available. If levels of funding required are not available, then a backstop position for the delivery of the site is also outlined as affordable housing rather than social. But it's a question of the time. It's more the time scales that we're doing this in not quite the right order, but.
Do you want to contribute anything, Mr. Morris? Are there any questions? Councillor Harper. Is it on the white papers?
Yeah.
Thank you.
I mean, obviously, this is a site Kimmy and I and Stuart are very familiar with, since it's on the edge of Fountain Oakwood. And I suppose it's just a point really. Obviously, it was a 3-phase site. Phase 1 will have the 11 houses built, which is effectively in the middle of it, of the bizarre way the thing's been developed. And then this is phase 2 at the back of it. And then phase 3, which is the block we're building at the moment, and has belatedly got small signs saying Maidstone Borough Council. I think we could have put bigger signs on it, to be honest. But so the bit at the front is being finished, and then the bit at the back, where all the contractors and all the equipment, everything's going to be moved up and down. It's going to go past the new building, which will presumably be occupied by the time this happens, and then those 11 houses. To me, I do not understand why the farthest land wasn't built up first, which would make a lot of sense in terms of disturbance to residents, but I mean, that's by the by. I mean, I think this is a good site for development. It's been sitting empty for years. It is weird that the housing bit was built in the middle, and now, you know, this part of it was left right to the very end. But the quicker it's built, and hopefully we will get the money when you look at those yellow papers for social housing, because we know there's a massive demand for it, and it is, you know, it's well located close to the town centre, where I think there probably is the biggest demand for social housing, with good access to the hospital as well. So I fully support this. I think it's probably the only site left in Fountain Oakwood where you can get social housing built now. So this would be good to see this come through as ASAP, really.
Very much. Any other questions? Right, there are 3 recommendations as per the report on page 145. Is that agreed? Agreed. Yep, thank you. Right, the next item is temporary accommodation plan, pages 151 to 159, with 8 recommendations across page 152 to 153. This will be introduced by Councillor Wales, Cabinet Member for Housing and Homelessness, and online we have William Cornell, Director of Regeneration and Place, who will contribute as necessary. Over to you, Councillor Wales. Busy night for you tonight.
I guess the clue's in the name of the committee, really, isn't it? I mean, the H in hackback gives it away. So the council currently has 215, as I alluded to earlier, households in temporary accommodation, those to whom we owe an accommodation duty under Part 7 of the Housing Act 1996. The council has over the years grown its own TA portfolio, temporary accommodation portfolio, which now comprises 208 units. So we're now close to being able to eliminate our reliance on nightly paid private temporary accommodation. The housing, as I mentioned before, the housing advice services and interventions are helping to reduce the numbers of households requiring TA. And by increasing our own TA portfolio, we have reduced our reliance on nightly paid TA. The report sets a target to continue to grow its TA portfolio, but only to the point where it can meet 95% of the total need of our own TA numbers, and that's basically because we will always need that bit of flexibility. We won't want to keep a house or a flat or whatever available for the on 1 or 2 odd nights that somebody might need TA. So this is a sort of a reset, really. The report makes various recommendations in respect to the use of the TA portfolio. There's 3 properties which are mentioned in there, which are going to be difficult to bring back into habitable use, and we're looking to dispose of those 3. What else? Oh yes, and the report also proposes that the council participates in the local authority housing fund round 4, which will provide grant funding for further provision of temporary accommodation. And initially, some of it will be given priority to the African relocation and assistance policy, but then these houses then, which will produce some properties for that scheme, but also some more for us, and then the houses from the relocation scheme will also then come back into our portfolio. So it's a way of using the government money to increase our portfolio. I'll stop it there. If there's more details of questions, then I'm sure Mr. Cornell will be able to answer them.
Yes. Is it on the white papers? Yeah. Thank you, Councillor Oliver.
Thank you, Chair. There's a moral question for you, in that these 3 properties are very expensive to make them compliant in terms of requirement of the absence of damp and mould in accordance with the new legislation. So we're happy to sell these onto the open market, let some poor child get black mould in their lungs because it's a bit expensive for us to fix. Is that right?
I think I can answer that one. You sell it on the open market and then whoever gets it does the remedial work. That's what normally happens. They gut it right back to brick. I can speak because I know one of the houses concerned. It'll go back to brick. The developer will do it. It's fairly common round that area. So that's basically what we're saying. We can't spend public money on it, but that a developer will, because they'll do the work and make more bang for the buck when they sell it on. You can tell I watch Homes Under the Hammer, can't you?
Sorry, can I just come back on that?
Yeah.
So it won't be like we're going to sell it to a developer, not to a private contractor, because it just seems immoral to sell a house that's uninhabitable because it's a bit expensive for us to do the work.
Right, well, I think I've explained what goes on, and at the end of the day, we're responsible for the public purse. What will happen is it will be sold as normal with the house, and it gets back to brick. I've got to do my house soon as well, and it'll be going back to brick, and work that needs doing. I think we have to get value for money for our money, but I'll hand over to Mr. Cornell if he wants to come in on this one, because I think it's a valid question. Thank you, William. Councillor Harper.
Thank you, Chair. So my understanding from what I've heard this evening is that, because earlier, a minute ago, I mentioned that out of all the 19 odd in fan, 11 aren't on the electoral roll, which is possibly quite likely. If these are only ever used for temporary accommodation, people go in and out of these properties. I can see the director nodding. Okay, so that would explain that. And I understand what we've heard about, these policy it relates to these three homes, but the irony is, without going on to yellow papers, the bottom property listed there, which is in Fant, actually has people in there at the moment, because it didn't, but people's names have appeared on the electoral roll, and the work I've been doing on the electoral roll this weekend. So we currently, as we've owned this property since 2019, have people living there. Now, the argument, and I think Mr. Cornell mentioned about properties with basements, and I can see Kimmy smiling, because in lots of Fant, it's quite difficult to find properties without basements. I mean, there are probably half the properties in Fant and Oakwood have basements, I would think, the nature of the slope of the land and so on. And looking at the list and knowing the list of the ones we have purchased, a lot of those will have basements. So, yeah, I'm a bit slightly sceptical on that, but I mean, perhaps outside of this meeting, I would be interested to know how comes that bottom property listed on the yellow papers is currently tenanted when we've heard that it's not really in a fit state.
Thank you, Councillor Harper. Sorry, did you want to come back, Councillor? Mr. Littlemore.
Thank you, Chair. Just to give assurances that although the properties, we have concerns about them, they're not in the sort of state that you see on some TV program where there's black walls and that. So if it was in a condition that was harmful to residents, we would move them out immediately. So it's just looking at the long-term condition of properties and what we would need to do over a longer term, as we're doing our business case in terms of looking at the HRI for the future. It's felt that these properties just don't match our requirements going forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everyone. Any more contributions? Okay, so you have a number of recommendations. I've heard the one debate around the properties concerned. So, do you agree the recommendations on the report contained on page 152 and 153? Agreed? Right, thank you very much. You will be glad to know I now declare this meeting closed. Thank you very much, everyone.